Welcome to the HR Business Blueprint podcast. I'm Nikki Masterman, founder and CEO of Inspired HR. In this series, alongside my fabulous guests, we will be chatting about becoming a consultant and building a HR business. Welcome to part one of my podcast with Jannine Perryman. We had such a great conversation. And we really did talk about so many valid subjects that we've actually split this into two parts. So welcome to part one. Today I am joined by Jannine Perryman, who is the founder of ADHD Wise and the author of 100 Ideas for Secondary Teachers Supporting Students with ADHD, which I have to say is a fantastic book.
Thank you.
Welcome, Jannine.
Thank you for having me, Nikki. It's really good to be here.
Yes, really. I'm really looking forward to our conversation, actually, because it's a conversation we've had many a time.
It is, yeah.
But we have been talking recently, and not only are you the founder of ADHD Wise, you are also the founder of a couple of other business ventures. Tell us a little bit more about them.
Well, it's only so long you can kind of carry on doing it on your own. And I've sort of tried to branch out before, but more successfully now. So we have a CIC called Focus CIC and a limited company called Thinking Partners Limited that will be more the commercial aspect of things. And obviously the not-for-profit stuff, the purpose-driven stuff can go through Focus CIC, which now holds a couple of smaller organisations as well, so they can apply for funding through us. So it's a big nice community feel to it, which I'm a very purpose-driven person, so that's where I get my dopamine from. So that works really well for me and for everybody else involved. So really quite proud of the journey, really.
And what services do all of your businesses offer, and kind of what do you specialise in under them?
I'm a little bit difficult to pigeonhole. And so I have the specialist teacher aspect of things. But before I went into education, I worked in recruitment, retention and coaching. So I'm going to say I take a very polymathic approach to neurodiversity, as much as that is my specialism. There are many aspects within that I would say that I have dopamine for all the knowledge I can possibly gain from it. So I'm a little bit difficult to pigeonhole. So I would do workplace training, I would do school-based training and other education, other sectors. And I do a lot of work with parents, I do a lot of work with young people, and I do a lot of work with adults as well. And I know that sounds all encompassing, and actually it is, but that's, I think, part of the beauty of an ADHD brain, because people are like, well, who do you specialise in terms of who you're coaching? It's just like, do you know what? I actually love that I have a diverse array of clients that I am supporting, because I think it's actually why I've been able to stay in coaching for as long as I have. Because it hasn't ever been just one group of people. It's always been dynamic. And it is like a box of chocolates. Literally, the person appears on the screen, the Zoom screen in front of you, and you don't know what you're going to get. And actually, do you know what? For an ADHD brain, that's magic. And then you do the training and stuff like that. And even though a lot of the stuff that I've got is generic, but then I'll have a conversation with a school or an employer and say, what are you actually finding by way of the challenges that you're facing? So I will shift bits around. I don't think I'm actually capable of delivering the same training the same way more than once. It's like I can have the same deck of slides, I can have the same time slot and just deliver it differently. And I think that actually has to be okay. And I actually think it's part of the magic. And I can take people on a journey. And I love it, mostly when I can go off piste and it's just like somebody will ask me a question, I'll be like, well, and we can really explore somebody's stuff rather than anything that I think is the agenda. I can think I know what people need to know, but ultimately, if I can be led by them, then that's where the magic works. So, as I say, very difficult to pigeonhole, but I'm quite proud of that.
And for those listening to this episode, what is a psychoeducation coach?
So this is where you bring together psychology. So it's biopsychosocial. So you're looking at the biology, you're looking at the psychology, and you're looking at the social aspect of things. And then you're helping the person in front of you based on education. So you're never going to fit cleanly into a clean coaching model, for example. You're always going to have to be asking yourself why you're speaking, etc., because ultimately the person is an expert on themselves. But psychoeducation means you can bring education. into the environment. So it's different to normal coaching in that they are leaning into my knowledge. They're absolutely doing that, and also my understanding of psychology. So they're leaning into those things as well, and that's understood and that's accepted. It's just more helpful when people are exploring who they are. There's a lot of narrative in the neurodiversity field about unmasking. And I think that's really problematic. I know it's really problematic in the workplace, but I think it is for everybody, sort of like as anybody who's going through that journey, because you see people suddenly saying, well, you know, and they kind of like make a bit of a mess as they unpack themselves. But if they have a coach, particularly a psychoeducational coach, who can help them to understand themselves safely before they start unmasking and peeling off these layers and sort of being sort of seen maybe for the first time as being, you know, maybe blunt, that sort of thing, in a way that they may not have done before. And it's like they need to know who they are themselves, but really before they allow themselves to be sort of seen by the rest of the world. It's like that unlayering and stuff. And psychoeducation's great for that, because they're leaning into me and they're gaining information from me, but they are the expert in themselves. But I might be the expert in those conditions, and it's just sharing that information until they're like, and they understand themselves, and then they understand how and when it's safe and not safe, appropriate, not appropriate, etc., to allow themselves to be seen. Because not everybody is actually deserving of our truths, and I think that's kind of like part of it as well. It's like, I don't know that I want everybody to know everything about me, and actually, why should anybody know anything about me? Have they earned that right to know everything about me? And I think particularly with our autistic clients, it's like them understanding that, you know, it's not just a question of here I am in my entirety. It's like, I am this version of me and this version of me and this version of me, and they are all authentic. But ultimately, this is the version of me that is appropriate for me and safe for me in this situation. And I think that's quite a complex thing to comprehend, because if you're not thinking about it and you're not working with somebody to undo this safely, we do see a mess sometimes.
So it really is educating people and really giving them that depth of knowledge that they wouldn't have had. I think sometimes we will refer to it as signposting within the professional sector, but actually neurodiversity, which is the subject we're talking about today, is a lot deeper. It's a lot more complex. And obviously this is the reason I wanted to talk to you. So we obviously collaborate quite a bit now.
Yeah.
And we initially met because you were actually the educational director and built the course for the ADHD qualification that I did last year, which, you know, was, I spent a year on the course that you'd written, which was a massive piece of work and something I committed to. And it was a real learning curve for me. And, you know, I've been on this journey of going down that rabbit hole for 3-4 years now, after one of my clients spotted my son stimming, and I wanted to know what that was, and I dug into it, and I suspected he was autistic due to some of the traits around food and just some of his general behaviours at home that I saw. And actually on that journey I also discovered he was ADHD, which then sent me on that journey of learning about ADHD, you know, those 3-4 years ago. And then I started kind of going, oh, let's tick these boxes. That's me, that's me, that's me, that's me. And I recognised all of these traits that were also me. And then I knew my brother was. And then I realised my niece and nephew they are ADHD dyslexic. My son's autistic ADHD. I suddenly started ticking the boxes on my mum, and then realised it actually has come down my mum's side of the family. I am a proud ADHD. I'm very open about it. It's nothing I hide. And why should I?
No.
Because I think if it creates a safe space for the employees that we help within the workplaces. So we met last year. It was a fantastic course that I really enjoyed, and obviously two entrepreneur ADHD brains coming together. I mean, when people see us two together, we start pinging up, oh, we could do this and we could do that, and what about this, and completely bounce off each other.
Everything in the world suddenly becomes possible, doesn't it?
It does, it does. And one of the things that I've really learned since getting to know you and work with you, and it's a lesson I learned when my grandson Grayson was born, who many know is a child with Down syndrome, and it was about taking a more positive approach to what's going on in our lives and taking a strength-based approach, which is very much something I advocate in my business.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the back of what I learned from yourself last year, we've introduced multiple services into our business, because like yourself, we start realising all these little gaps and how we make sure we cover things for our client, which is We now do the screening. And we'll come on to that in a little while, because I want to talk about this additional screening that you are going to be doing and the benefits of that, which we will be working together on. I look forward to learning more about that myself. We obviously do the neurodiversity coaching now, we do the training, and we've done casework management for 3 or 4 years now, and really specialise in that and supporting other larger organisations, our own clients, and also the HR consultancy world that don't have our knowledge that we have. And, yourself and I were continuing to build on those services, and you and your team work alongside me and Jenny in my business to deliver those services.
Yep.
And making sure that the right person is put in front of those individuals as well, because me and Jenny have very much an approach around the 6 most common conditions where we really specialise in workplace. But sometimes someone will come to us that needs a much more specialist, larger reach, larger condition knowledge and expertise, which you have got.
Yeah.
And I witnessed that recently with you, Jannine. I had someone that had come to us for screening, and it wasn't going to be a workplace one. It was going to be what I refer to as a whole person one. And I got you to take that coaching and feedback session on the reports that we had produced for the screening. And for those listening, just to be very clear, our screening service is not a diagnosis service. It is an indicator of conditions, traits, and how something could be present within somebody based upon their responses at a moment in time. But it really helps a person understand themselves and the world around them, and why they may do things in a certain way, or maybe what's going on in their life, and gives them some answers. It gives them strengths, it gives them possible strengths, it gives them challenges and possible challenges.
Yeah.
And then it gives them a whole host of resources to start helping themselves. Now, we focus from a business point of view very much on the workplace, but when it comes to whole self, that's where we then bring in your wonderful team and yourself.
Yeah.
Because sometimes there's a bigger expertise, whether that's Tourette's or OCD, that's sometimes needed in the areas that we don't specialise in. And that's why I surround myself with great collaborators. And you've really brought neurodiversity alive. Now, I sat in on this session. This particular individual had come for, you specialise in mental health.
Yep.
And this particular individual had had a tough time, and I knew that wasn't an expertise, it wasn't a workplace expertise that I could help him. So this is where I brought yourself in. Now, when I sat on that session, I think the words I used to you afterwards was, it was like watching magic happen. Not only did I see this fantastic coach that I continue to learn from, but I also saw this person who'd had a tough time. There's a lot gone on in his life,
Yeah.
which you didn't know about, and I never disclosed to you, but I knew a little bit more about it. And I just saw this person and this whole sense of relief. It was like watching a weight come off someone's shoulders. Physically, you could see the weight lift off his shoulders. I watched and observed his body language and his face. And this person just opened up to you. And even now, I continue to hear about the difference that session made to him. How do you feel when you make a difference to somebody's life like that?
Well, it's kind of the ultimate, isn't it? It's why we do what we do. I've never really been... I mean, we all need to earn a living, right? But it's not about earning a killing. It's about the privilege, really, of being able to earn a living and feel like you make a difference at the same time. For me, as a very purpose-driven person, that's kind of like the ultimate. And I think, I mean, you're saying it, referring to it as magic, but for me, it's more about setting up a psychologically safe space so the person can be themselves, knows that they're safe enough to explore themselves and express themselves, that it's a judgment-free zone, and therefore you can go there with some of the tougher stuff and you can ask questions that means the person can sort of like think about that for themselves and come up with their own solutions, and explore safely. And I think that, is that magic? Yeah, I suppose it could be described as magic. It feels like magic sometimes. You come off some calls sometimes and you take a deep breath and you go, wow. And other times, of course, you come off and you're just like, oh my gosh, because compassion fatigue is huge in coaching. I have to say that there are times when I'm like, I'm just done now. So I try, for example, to keep my coaching so that it finishes on a Thursday, so that I'm not then speaking to anybody else until Monday afternoon, because my nervous system needs time to recover. Because you're turning up to someone and the responsibility of coaching is actually huge. And I don't think people really get that. And I spoke at the British Psychological Society's coaching psychology conference, and I was talking about the imperative to take this seriously, to take ADHD coaching seriously, because you are talking about people with vulnerabilities. You are, and whether that is ADHD or whether it's broader neurodivergence, and whether there's trauma involved, but there usually is adversity at least involved. So the trauma-informed aspect of it all. So it's that safe space. It's a really, really serious profession. And the screening is serious stuff as well, because you're asking people to peel back their layers. Who are you to do that if you're not prepared to do all of the stuff that you would expect of a therapist? So the sort of like holding the person in unconditional positive regard, being trauma-informed, making sure that they are safe and that you are a safe person, so your supervision's in place and everything is in place. It's a serious, serious profession, not just the coaching, but the screening and everything that we do. And it's just like, we've spoken about sort of like, what do we do about making sure that seriousness, the duality of it, the whole thing around it being a privilege as well, because I do see those windows of time that I spend with people as being my privilege. They really are, but the responsibility that goes with that too. And it's serious work. It's beautiful work. As you say, it can be magic. Honestly, it's hard. It's really hard, and you have to look after yourself as well. But yeah, it's thank you for saying it's magic, and that feels good. Of course it does. But it comes with a hell of a lot of responsibility.
Yeah. And let's be honest here, that coaching cannot always get the successes we would like, because it's affected by humans.
Yes.
And we can do the best job we can, but if people don't listen, they don't take on board, they're not open to it, we don't always get the successes we would like to get.
Not everybody is coachable yet. And I think that's the word yet is on there. It's like counselling as well. It's like you have to be ready for it in order for it to work, and you have to have a good match with the person. And so not everybody is coachable yet. It's hard work. You're asking somebody to look at themselves, to explore themselves. And are they ready? And am I the right person? And all of those things, because, can I create a psychologically safe space for every single person in the world? Absolutely not. But I'll do my best. And sometimes that works, sometimes it won't. And sometimes they're not ready. And you don't know what else is going on in their family as well. There are other things where they can have a session with you, it can feel like it's gone really well, and then they go back to their normal life and they're under some influences that they're not ready to kind of explore yet. And therefore they might not get the best out of it, because the genuine work in coaching is not in the actual coaching session, it's in the bits in between. It's what they go away with and then they come back with, and then they go away with and they come back with. And obviously we have no hold over that. That's down to them, so they have to be very ready. So no, not coaching will not always work, and it has to be a choice. It has to be an informed choice, and not everyone's ready yet.
Very important yet. Now, you touched on something there that we've talked about before, and I guess this leads to the decision as to why I chose to do the course that you designed last year. And you've touched on it very briefly there, that even I'm seeing all over social media people branding themselves as ADHD coaches. They've done, a 12-hour course, or they've done, a 6-hour course, that, all these cheap and cheerful e-learning things out there. And I know I worry. I chose to do a year-long training in this because I wanted that in-depth knowledge from a group of experts, with people that had the information. It was face-to-face. We learned from a lot of experts. And I chose to spend a year, which was a lot of hours. We're talking 50 hours of coaching. We were talking weekly training of 2 to 2.5 hours. We were talking 2.5 hours every week of reading books and educating ourselves. That was some major hours I put into that last year. And I saw the benefit of that, because I worried And then I still worry at the amount of people branding themselves as ADHD coaches because they've done a short e-learning course. And the truth is that when people are looking for neurodiversity coaching, they don't think of looking at what levels are they or what training have they done. They just see the ADHD coaching. And I know that was a big reason you decided to design the programme that you did, and it was the reason I decided to attend it.
Yeah.
What damage can happen when someone attempts to coach somebody who is neurodiverse and they get it wrong because they haven't got that depth of learning?
I mean, let's be honest, even with the depth of learning, we can do harm. And it's that imperative of recognising that you can sometimes make mistakes. But knowing where you end is really, really important. I think one of the things I've really appreciated from being on the ICF journey is the clean coaching and the kind of like stepping back from things. And actually, I'm going to say to you, to going down the ICF route after you've been psychoeducational coaching is incredibly hard, because you actually kind of like have to rewind quite a lot, and would recommend people doing it the other way around, by the way, and various other ways of getting accreditation, etc. as well. But you really do have to know where you end. You have to be able to own your own stuff as well. And I feel very grateful really that I started in arts and health, because as an arts practitioner, you do learn about reflective practice. You learn to own your stuff. That is kind of part of what training in arts does. And I'm so grateful for that, because I think that just meant that I was always thinking, what's mine of this? And when something doesn't go to plan, it's like, what part of that was me? And then being able to have a conversation with someone and saying, do you know what, that didn't go particularly well. I'd like to say to you, I think this was my fault, this was on me. So I can think of one person in particular. I contacted him after a session and I said just that to him. I said that I pushed too hard on something there, and I was wrong. And you've got to have quite a lot about you, I suppose, to kind of like own those moments. But we went on to have an ongoing coaching relationship after that. And this was somebody who, when I first started working with him, wasn't working. His family had sorted the coaching out. And by the time we'd got to the end of our relationship, albeit that I expect I'll see him every now and then at some point, but goodness knows when that might be, he was working as an unqualified teacher and about to embark upon teacher training. So that's quite a huge difference and quite a huge journey. But there was a huge blip in the middle there where I made a mistake, where I had put a little bit too much of myself into it. And I think it wasn't major, but it was just a little bit, and I noticed it made him prickle. And you have to notice that's, and you have to own it, because you're not going to be a perfect coach. Now, I had a conversation with somebody who was having psychotherapy, and there was a difficulty in the relationship, and the psychotherapist put it all on their client. Now, that's never appropriate for a therapist to do, and it's never appropriate for a coach to do. It's that whole thing of taking a deep breath and thinking, what of that is mine? If you're not skilled, experienced enough, don't have the supervision, don't have the reflective skills to do that, you can do harm and not even realise that you've done it. So you can't go back and undo it. You can't, I'm hoping that the example I've given shows the imperative of knowing where you are, who you are, and what is yours. And I do think that my classroom aspect, the fact that I've worked so closely with young people for a long period of time, means that, and obviously I've seen explosive behaviours and those sorts of things from a classroom perspective. The role there, of course, is to look to yourself and think, what was mine in that? So I suppose I bring that into coaching because it's in my training, it's in my experience to do that. It's like, what if that was mine in those moments where things don't go to plan? And to be honest, I think there are very rare occasions where I feel that things are awry and that there is something to go back. And I can only think of maybe I've been coaching full-time since January 2019, and I think there's been 3 times where I felt the need to kind of go back and say, I need to explain something and apologise and own something during that time. Because it's, most of the time you're quiet. Most of the time, if you're speaking, you've got to be asking yourself, why am I speaking? Because the person who should be speaking and thinking is the client. So if you're not speaking that much, there's less chance that you're going to do harm. So it's helping people come to themselves versus you putting anything into the space. And my own coach, we were talking about curiosity, and he said, curiosity has no opinion. And I was just like, oh, I love that. Because if you're genuinely being curious with your clients and you don't have an agenda, you have no opinion, and that makes you so much safer. And in terms of setting up psychologically safe spaces, I felt like that was just a real sort of like gift of wisdom. And I said that to him, and he was just like, it wasn't me that said it, it was you. So we don't even know who it was that came up with it, but between us we did. So I have coaching myself, and I think that that is kind of, I'm also saying, you know, has there been sort of like difficult moments with my own coach? Yeah. Of course, but that's the whole thing. It's like, why would I coach and not have coaching? Because if I believe in coaching enough to be doing it, I should really be also investing in having it, and not just coaching supervision, but actual coaching.
And that's practicing what we preach.
Yeah.
Very much so. You talk about safe spaces.
Yeah.
Do you think it's an advantage for a coach if they are neurodiverse and they are a neurodiversity coach? What's your thoughts on that? This is a debate I've had with many a person. I've had individuals who have felt safer in that space, knowing that you genuinely understand. But I also know then comes the challenges of you have to be very good at managing your own challenges and traits of your condition when you are coaching somebody, and that you don't put too much of yourself onto them as well. What's your thoughts on whether a neurodiversity coach benefits from being neurodiverse?
There is an inherent understanding and shared experience that can come from having someone coach you who's got a similar neurotype or similar adversity or similar work experience or anything along those lines. Of course, those levels of parallel are helpful. But I do want to point out that I specifically chose to have a coach who knew nothing of neurodiversity at all. And are there moments where I have to be like, no? Because there was one where he was just like, okay, so what would be the consequence of you not doing that? And I was like, no, that won't work for me. I have said this, and then this, therefore this means that. But I know myself. I know my neurodiversity, and therefore I didn't need neurodiversity coaching. So it's like I went to somebody who was an expert in that thing. Do I like the fact that he has... Well, did I choose him because he had professional experience that I was trying to emulate? Yes, that's why I chose him. So I guess what I'm saying is, but you want somebody who is going to understand what you're bringing. Whether it's an inherent understanding or whether it's a learned understanding, I guess that's down to the individual to decide. I wouldn't say, though, one thing I definitely wouldn't say is somebody who's got the lived experience but doesn't have the training, that's not a good idea. But somebody who's got both... or somebody who's got the professional understanding and the experience, that's reasonably safe, and that's a personal decision to make. I don't know that I want to come down completely firmly on one thing or another, but you want someone who gets it. For whatever reason, they get it. But I would say that there are beautiful moments when there's a shared understanding of things, and like, you know, the person is kind of saying something and they look at you and they know you get it and they don't have to explain themselves. One of the reasons quite a lot of my clients are teachers, for example, is they have to explain less. They have to explain less because they'll be talking about something that's happening at work, and they'll be talking about planning or classroom management or managing a TA, and I will just nod and they will know I understand. So it isn't just about neurodiversity, but it's about working with people who actually get what you're doing. You know, I mean, it's just, I would say it's that, but it's very, very personal choice. One of the reasons that we do podcasts and things like that, though, isn't it, is because we want people to be able to hear our voices, see what we stand for, because then people come on a call with you, they already know what you stand for. They've already got an idea whether you're somebody they want to learn alongside, explore themselves alongside. It's one of the reasons it's really good to have voices of coaches out there, so people can actually choose from an informed perspective who they're going to go and spend their time and money with, because it's vulnerable work.
It is vulnerable work, and I've come across that as, you know, I've been going on that journey. Now, you touched very briefly on there about your own lived experience, Jannine. Do you are you happy to share a little bit about your own lived experience?
Oh, I'm always talking about my lived experience whenever it's appropriate to do so. So I was diagnosed when I was 41 on the back of, first of all, my eldest daughter was, she had ADHD added to her autism diagnosis when she was 19, and I was livid because I didn't believe in ADHD. And what's really bad about that is I was working in the autism field. I was an autism researcher and practitioner, and I didn't believe in ADHD, and I was wrong. Mm-hmm. And they proved that I was wrong, and they had to come to me and they were like, if we are right, there is everything to gain. And if we're wrong, there's nothing to lose. Let's do the assessments. And so I kind of took a deep breath and went, and we did them. And I was wrong. And the new information made me a better mum to Vicky. Mm-hmm. Then I'm looking at my son, and I mean, talk about being the stereotype. Will is very much the stereotype. And so I don't even know whether it was school that mentioned it first or me, but it was just like, yep, from the first conversation that we had with school. But I do remember going into the GP surgery and the GP surgery saying, oh, he can't have ADHD because he's not climbing the walls. Mm-hmm. And as I say, he is the poster child. That doesn't mean he can't sit in a doctor's surgery for a few minutes. That's a bit of misunderstanding by the GP at that time. But that was the only resistance we ever had to Will. And we had a lot of resistance with regards to Becca, my other daughter, because she's of the annoying variety, the ones that are gifted and talented, that can do the science, that can sing, can get along with people, can to some extent organise herself until she got into the middle of her GCSEs. And then it was kind of like the wheels started to fall off and she couldn't cope. And so it manifested as anxiety. We had problems with the Senko, who didn't want to accept any difference in Becca, just like it's just her periods. So there's kind of like that gender issue with all of those things. And I was accused of pathologising my daughter, and I really doubted myself. But then I'd been a speaker at a particular conference, and I was sat next to Dr. Helen Reid of ADHD Consultancy, and I was upset about the Becca situation, and she said, bring her to me. So I tootled down to London with Becca, and we tootled away 2.5 hours later with a combined diagnosis for Becca. And Helen's been part of her support network ever since, because her GP surgery have continued, even when she changed to go to university, continued to support shared care. So I was adopted into the NHS, that's all been done. But then there was an issue where it was just like, is this the right medication? Helen was equipped and able to kind of say, please do this, and the GP surgery did. So, that's been incredibly helpful. And Becca and my experience has been used to inform medical practice. So Becca and I are content creators for 8 Medical School. So an adapted version of Becca's story has been used to inform future GPs, future medical practitioners, using VR headsets. They can really get themselves into the zone. They can hear sort of like Becca's back sort of thoughts on it. It's like while she's sitting in the waiting room, and I hope they take me seriously, and all of those things that she was thinking. So we've been able to get involved in all sorts of things on the back of everything.
Now, it's interesting you were talking there about your daughter, Becca, because as you were talking, I was ticking little boxes in my head of, that's my son, that's my son, that's my son. So my son, like your daughter, is really gifted and talented. He's just had his SAT results, absolutely phenomenal results. And he's very gifted in maths and science. He has friends, although interestingly, I do notice that all of his friends, I can spot a neurodiverse on the Senko. So it's very much, mirroring and attracting to similar personalities. Now, for myself, there is still a lot of confusion over, is diagnosis essential? Is screening and just understanding yourself and getting assessments? So for those listening, for me, I didn't go down the formal diagnosis route. I went down this route and recognised, which under the Equality Act is still covered if you recognise and believe you are. So for me, I recognised I was on the back of starting to tick all these little boxes on the traits that I saw in myself with my son. I've gone through a number of assessments and screenings. So for those who are listening to this episode, diagnosis is currently taking 7 to 10 years. We know from a diagnosis point of view, they'll do one condition at a time, but actually, as I learned when I did your course last year, very rarely does it sit alone. It often co-occurs, which can then impact upon each other, especially if you're autistic ADHD or odd ADHD, as a lot of people refer to it, which was a real eye-opener for me, because actually until I did your course last year, I hadn't really got into depth on that. So I took a personal choice when I looked at what are the benefits of diagnosis, and was anything going to change for me? It wasn't for me. I know it gives you access to medication a lot of the time. I personally decided that wasn't right for me, so I decided going formal diagnosis wasn't for me. However, I have done screening and assessments that indicate ADHD, so it's actually standalone present has come up in my mind. But one of them, when I had the feedback, indicated I was a high-level masker. So because I've spent my whole life being a problem solver and putting solutions in place for everyone else without actually realising I had these challenges in myself. And it gave me a lot of answers. My attendance in my last year of school was 40%. I nicked off. I was never there. I got bored easy, but I was intelligent and had a good head on my shoulders. I just chose not to use it. So I also haven't put my son through the diagnosis route. He's pretty well managed. Probably his biggest challenge is interrupting, which is actually one of my biggest challenges. So I am very self-aware. Now, with the screening that I had and that we do, it's really beneficial to help individuals understand more about themselves, what their challenges are, what their strengths are, and how they can really kind of go on that journey, and gives them the resources. Now, I've took quite a unique approach to the way we do our services in the business. So where you talked about you've gone on this journey of all these different education things that you've done, where you've done that within your education and neurodiversity world, where you've learned all these different subjects, I initially did that within HR. So when I set up my HR business 9 years ago, I then trained to be a civil and workplace mediator. I've then done the ADHD coaching training. I have an L&D background. I'm a certified DISC profiler. I'm a coach, but then I'm a HR exec. And so I'm like yourself. I've educated myself, but I've never actually gone the formal education route until I did the ADHD coaching last year. You know, I've done all of this training. So I've took on the back of learning all of these things, because every service my business does, I can do myself, because I won't introduce nothing I don't know myself.
And I know you well enough to know that you will explore it to expert level.
I will,
yes.
and I love it. And I also have that real innovative entrepreneur part of my ADHD, which I wouldn't have built the incredible business I've got now if I didn't have that. So for me, my ADHD has been an absolute strength, and I am on paper the positive benefits that somebody with ADHD can bring
100%.
to their career and business and everything. I absolutely have nailed that. I have my challenges. I can burn out, and I will often ignore it. So you will know when I burn out, because I'm go quiet and then I'll start. So I am learning to take breaks. But what I've introduced into my model is where I do mediation, because I'm a DISC profiler, I actually include DISC profiling in my mediation, because I think it really benefits me when I mediate someone, that to help them understand themselves and everyone around them really benefits that process as to why two people might be clashing. I might have a high red with a high blue that are just not getting on. And I actually have introduced that into my neurodiversity coaching model. So when I am asked to coach somebody with ADHD coaching, I know when I did the training with you last year, it can sometimes take till the second or third session to really nail what that person's trying to achieve, and for you to understand them, what are their strengths, what are their challenges. So where we have become a profiler and a screener with Do-IT Profile, which was introduced to me as part of your programme, and they've approved us as a screener, and as far as I'm aware, I'm the only HR company that does that in the UK at the moment. We're very unique. I actually now provide that as part of the service for the ADHD coaching. And that's a prerequisite of my ADHD coaching, which I'm very upfront with individuals, which is it's provided as part of the service, because I want that person to get the best from their sessions with me. And one of the best things I can do is go into these sessions with that individual, help them understand themselves, help them understand their strengths and their challenges, and help them get the best from that process for as quickly as possible,
Absolutely.
which it really enables me to do. But I also know not everybody has the opportunity to do that.
Well, no, they don't, but they should. And actually, even when you look at the diagnostics, if it doesn't come with an evaluation of strengths and challenges, it's of less use than if it did, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And support, both in education and in the workplace, is needs-based, not diagnosis-based anyway. But we obviously hang on the diagnosis because what I've just said is the theory, but in practice we know it's difficult to get the support without the diagnosis. But actually, it's a point of law; it's not required, not in education and not in the workplace. So there's swings and roundabouts. So a diagnostic assessment that also comes with all those strengths and challenges, analysed, presented to the person for them to be able to kind of like work through, is really, really helpful. Does everybody need to be diagnosed? No. And actually, one of the criteria for a diagnosis is that the diagnostician has to be able to say in what way the diagnosis is useful. So if you are not struggling, you don't need a diagnosis. But presumably you are struggling, and that's why you're looking for an assessment to see whether that's the root cause of the struggle, because ultimately, how do you stop struggling if you don't know why you're struggling? And the point at which I went for mine, I was expecting to get a diagnosis of autism. I'd actually gone for autism, but I was very fortunate in that my NHS pathway that I had access to at the time, which was when I was 41 and I'm now 52, so 11 years ago, the psychologist in that first interview said, I think this is predominantly ADHD versus predominantly autism. So I'm going to say we're going to go down the ADHD pathway, and that isn't to negate autism as a possibility for you. I think this is just going to be more useful to you, and you may not need the autism assessment. And so that's what happened for me, and I was given this pathway to ADHD, and he was absolutely completely correct. And for the most part, I've got my diagnosis is combined with autistic traits. Now, there has only been one point in my life where it would have been useful since to actually had the autism properly assessed, and that was when I hit a really adverse point in my life that I don't particularly want to talk about. But the reality is I was then told by my GP actually put in a letter that my presentation of trauma was more the autistic presentation of trauma, which was kind of like a bit of a head blower at the time, which is possibly not the best time to be kind of like giving me that kind of curveball. But I know it was some of the best of intentions, but it's like, oh, actually, was that the right time to be telling me that? So that's the only time really is I would probably have had less adversity in that particular situation and may have actually not ended up with CPTSD as a result of it if I'd known previously. So I'm going to say diagnosis is a useful thing. It can be very preventative of secondary conditions because knowledge is power, and you can protect yourself if you understand yourself, and you can ask for support if you understand yourself and you have a diagnosis. But actually it shouldn't be required, and I shouldn't have been in the situation where I was traumatized by a process regardless. And so it's a complicated thing from that perspective. So I'm going to say diagnostics for some people is the right path. Is it always necessary? Absolutely not. You talked about Do-IT Profiler, which I use too, and I rate very, very highly. It isn't the only process that we use, because we've just started using Creyos because it gives you sort of like scientific assessments for people. And actually, as you said, with regards to coaching, when you're looking at their strengths and their challenges, that's really helpful. Because when you've got information before you start, so you've got less exploration to do, and then your questions are like, so could this be because of that? And it's like, well, looking at your profile, what do you think might be behind this? It's like your coaching questions are going to be different because you've got that information. And then you put something like Creyos into the mix, which is what we now do. Not for everybody, if they want it, because not everybody does, and personal choice is very, very important. But things like processing speed and processing speed under stress can be something that is really, really helpful to understand, and sort of like nuance and things, because it can pick up on literal interpretation of things and all sorts of things like that. So you kind of get a window into autistic traits that you might not get otherwise. It's not diagnostics. I've done Professor Susan Young's training, so I can do screening right up to the line where I'd have to hand it over to a diagnostician. So the level I can do screening at is high, but I can't diagnose, and I don't want to diagnose. I kind of quite like that I get to stop there and then pass it to somebody else who can look at the evidence that we've produced, take their own stance on it, check my work, ask questions of the client and sort of like look at it from that perspective. But every single report that we've ever written that's had a combination of Do-IT, Creyos and our clinical interviewing, which was as Professor Susan Young's trained, has always resulted in the diagnosis that we have put together. It's always been that case, but is that always necessary? Is that enough for most people? Yes, it's enough for most people. Unless you're chronically and pervasive, unless you're in trouble, unless you're at risk of losing your job, or you're falling the wrong side of the justice system, or you're at risk of domestic abuse, or anything like that, where it's actually like, is it chronic and pervasive? Is it getting in your way of the next step in your life? Because the right to thrive, nobody should just be surviving and thinking, I'm just a rubbish human being. If you're thinking I'm just a rubbish human being, absolutely go and get yourself screened and maybe even assessed fully, because ultimately you don't deserve to feel like that. Nobody deserves to feel like they're just a rubbish human being, because no one is just a rubbish human being. If you're struggling, there is a reason behind the struggle. So let's identify what it is, whether it's screening or whether it's diagnosis.
Thanks for listening to the HR Business Blueprint podcast. For any information on what we've covered in this episode, head over to the show notes. And make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Thanks for listening.